your insurance money.
Exactly.
I don't even have insurance policies on you guys.
Yeah.
And yet, if someone were like, 20 years down the road, if I did have insurance policies on you and someone were like, have you ever done that? I would have to say, probably I'd have to say the fifth, right? Because you don't want to say like, yes, 20 years before I ever had an insurance policy on them, I joked on a podcast once.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
what happens on the podcast is real. It's all real.
It's recorded history. I don't know what you mean.
Oh, God, that's disturbing.
This is what we're doing. We're recording our history.
Until the internet goes away, which is not going to be too long from now.
Yeah, please go away, internet.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand pleading the fifth to that, but I don't totally understand pleading the fifth to were you responsible for his death?
Well, yeah, and, it doesn't make sense to me. It's not so much that I'm saying, wow, I think she's guilty. I'm just saying it doesn't quite make sense. But again, if her lawyer just told her, hey, here's what you say, nothing. Just say the fifth, and that's it. And so, okay. And also Nancy was asked if she would take a polygraph test, and she wouldn't do that either.
She's guilty.
Yeah,
Which
pretty
proves
much.
nothing, because polygraphs are useless.
Yeah, I mean, but still, but you can see why Nancy is a lot of people's favorite suspect.
Oh, of course.
You can see that. But as far as I know, as I said, as far as I know, Nancy and her husband Don were in Florida when Philip Shue died. Of course, that doesn't mean they didn't hire somebody to bump him off. But as far as I know, there's no evidence that she actually had anything to do with Colonel Shue's death. Doesn't mean she didn't do it. And like I said, a lot of people think she did. But let's put her on hold for a minute while we talk about another suspect.
Hold, please.
Okay, click. Yeah.
Now, back to your regularly scheduled program.
All right, here we are. So our next suspect is Tracy Shue. Yes, the bereaved widow. As one commenter noted, if Nancy had 1 million reasons to murder Philip Shue, well, Tracy actually had twice as many.
1.8.
1.8 times as many. Yeah. Okay, close.
Or 80% more? I don't know.
Yeah. And actually, well, in some ways, Tracy would be a better candidate. Number one, she wasn't in Florida. She was in Bernie. The timeline for Shue's death, when you think about it, doesn't quite add up. I mean, so he leaves the house about 5:30, next spotted at 8:14. So that's 2 hours and 44 minutes in which to do the following things. You got to intercept Philip Shue in his car, get him out of it, take him to a nice private place where he can be taped to a chair and tortured for a while. And I see all those things, cutting off his finger, his ear, the slit in the chest, the nipple, and all that stuff. Probably took a little while. Because when you torture people, you don't just like go bing, 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 bang. You want to stop and talk like in the movies.
And drag it out. They experience. If you do it fast, then it's all the pain at once, which is not the point.
Right.
Yeah,
It's little bits at a time.
Yeah, so they go through this whole torture session. And then, at some point, of course, they take a break and leave him alone long enough for him to free himself from
Go
the
get
bond.
a cappuccino.
Yeah, they did something.
Breakfast.
Breakfast
time.
Breakfast break.
Yeah,
Breakfast
I know.
torture break.
I know, it's like these people never saw a movie, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right. So
Or they really saw a movie.
Yeah, and so somehow he escapes. So added a few minutes at least for Shue to get from wherever he was in captivity to where he was spotted on Highway 10. That's a lot of stuff to get done in a few hours. Especially the part about leaving him alone long enough to escape. Because remember, when you leave the guy alone long enough to escape, he's got to struggle for a little bit. There's got to be a little drama there. Okay. And so that's a problem for me with the whole Nancy did it scenario. Mm-hmm. But, at least for me. But at the same time, you got to also remember that he left his house a lot earlier than usual, like an hour earlier. Which you'd think would have screwed up the kidnapper's plans. If they know he always leaves the house at 6:30 a.m. for the office.
They wouldn't. They theoretically probably would have shown up a little bit before he's supposed to leave, but not a huge
not
amount
an
of
hour
time.
earlier. Yeah. But when you think about it, if Tracy had done the deed, she wouldn't have been as constrained by time, since she could have lied about when he actually left the house.
True.
And by the way, she would have known that he was leaving an hour early. And of course, by the way, I mean, she could have just, for that matter, have chloroformed him in his sleep.
Or Benadrylled him.
Or Benadrylled him, or tied him up, or duct taped him, or something. So the hired guys, that the hitmen that you've hired, they come and get him. They take him away for a little torture and murder session, right? Mm-hmm. And so it wouldn't have been necessary in that case to intercept him in his car somehow. Remember,
this changes the timeline from 2 hours and 44 minutes to as much time as
10 hours. Yeah, exactly. She would have had any time between late the night before and 8:14 the next day. This also makes it not necessary to intercept him in his car, which, by the way, is not as easy as you think, because remember, he was altering his route to work every day. And so you got to not just intercept him, but remember, he's a little paranoid, so coaxing him out of his car, would be kind of difficult. But that's, again, not necessary if Tracy is involved, right? So that makes, in a sense, that makes Tracy a better suspect, right?
It also adds... one of the things we're not really talking about so much is that you have to intercept his car and then have his car go to the location that he then escapes from. So if Tracy did it, it's totally plausible that her DNA and fingerprints and all that stuff are found all over his car.
Of course
should they do a forensic investigation of his car, because that's his wife, right? So if she's involved, she puts him in the car, drives him someplace, drags him out, and then he escapes and is like, oh, what, my car's here, cool, and escapes in that. And then if they were to do some sort of autopsy or whatever on the car, she'd be like, that's my husband's car, of course my DNA is everywhere. I drive it all the time.
I could totally see a scenario where the guys don't even come to get him at the house. She, like you said, she just puts him in a passenger seat and drives him to the torture spot, right?
Well, so here's one of those things.
He was driving a little four-door sedan.
Yeah.
So it was a
Mercury Tracer, I think.
It's a smaller car.
Yeah, it's just a fairly cheap economy kind of car.
But it's a four-door, but it would be possible if it was Tracy and Philip and an accomplice. They all three could have ridden in the same car to the torture location.
Oh, sure.
It could have also just been she brings him. I mean, so one of those things, right, that is going to put me on a list or something is I Googled how much Benadryl lethal dose.
Yeah, how much?
And it's I think it's 10.1 milligram to, I don't know, there's some big formula, but basically what it says is that if you weigh 165 pounds, 757 milligrams of Benadryl will kill you.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So,
that's a lot.
It's actually, it's a lot, but each pill is about 25 milligrams. So if we can even assume 800 milligrams just for round, it's only 32 capsules. Yeah. Which is it's a lot for you to take willingly, but
Well, actually,
it's not that much. And he could have been, if she had dosed him, he would have been sleepy, and she would have been like, okay, Phil, let's go. Let's go in the car.
Or he gets up, he's taking a shower. She goes and makes him a smoothie and dumps a bottle of pills in there.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's your smoothie, dear.
This is why I always make my own smoothies.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I don't let anybody else make those things for me.
Anyway, sorry, that was a bit of a derailment.
No, that's fine. There's one website out there called militarycorruption.com. I'm sure
these guys, they are all over this case.
Something.
Yeah, well, they were in their earlier. They've actually done a lot of material about this case, and they're totally on the side of the murder theory.
Of course they are.
As again, a lot of other people are too. I mean, seriously, I would say that the murder theory is the prevalent theory out there. Would you not? I mean, you guys have done the research on this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's the big theory. In their earlier write-ups, they totally took Tracy's side in this story, but then they had a change of heart and decided that Tracy was probably the killer after all, and not Nancy. And I won't lead you through all their reasoning, but they are totally convinced that Tracy is the perp in this case. And for one thing, they do have some evidence that Tracy's made it out to be.
Well, that's not uncommon in these kind of situations, though.
Yeah, well, Tracy made it out to be like, he was my soulmate, but of course the guy's dead.
How many times have we read similar things from spouses of someone who had died?
Oh yeah,
it's very consistent behavior.
You don't say bad things.
You don't say he was such a flaming a-hole, and I'm not gonna miss him.
Yeah,
because that's just not what you say.
Yeah, but here's something else I will say is that just because someone is your soulmate doesn't mean that you're their soulmate. Right? I mean, it's possible that she was totally telling the truth and saying, he was my soulmate, and what she's really saying there is, and he was trying to leave me, and no way was I going to let that happen.
And so, if I can't have, nobody will. I mean, where were we? No, I didn't mean that at all. So it wasn't as idyllic, but it doesn't mean that. I know a lot of people that are in so marriages. Well, Steve, you.
Oh, that was hard.
Oh, God.
I'm just kidding. And Devin, not yet, but.
Soon. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
But here's the thing: is that she made such a ruckus over this.
Oh, she did.
That behavior doesn't match up.
Well, yeah, I know. It would be a little strange, don't you think? Because he made a huge fuss. He went to court. And she got CBS News interested and got them to interview her and make a big special about it. And you'd think if she had a hand in the killing, she would have just kept her mouth shut. Because, if she had actually done the deed, it was like, sweet. They declared suicide. They issued a report.
She could have appeared to be grieving and then just walked away.
Yeah.
But
so that's why I don't buy Tracy as the killer.
I agree with that. I mean, overall, but I just want to go ahead and add to this that, like, we don't know what was necessarily going on behind the scenes of this, where, like, you don't know what her friends were saying to her, right? You don't know what people were pushing her to do, and she might have felt obligated to do if she were. I mean, again.
Are you equating this to the same situation as, what was that movie, Gone Girl? Did you guys see that?
No, I didn't see that one.
Ben Affleck. And I'm not gonna screw it. It's been long enough. It doesn't matter. The spoiler alert. He hates his wife and he wants to leave her, and then she quote unquote disappears. And then when she comes back, he's figured out that she staged the entire thing.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
But he is now forced to stay with her because he's, all of this social pressure.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm more saying that, like, she could have had the group of friends that are like, it's super effed up what Nancy is doing. Like, obviously Nancy had him killed. Why aren't you more upset about this? And she was like, oh crap, well, now it looks suspicious that I'm not.
I could sort of see that.
I don't.
And she might have
totally buy it, but
she might have actually felt safe enough that it's like
well, they didn't. I mean, obviously they didn't collect evidence from the car or anything, right?
Some. I mean, I don't think they just like pulled his body out and towed it away. I mean,
but by the time that she seemed to be raising a ruckus, she kind of knew what evidence was out there.
Yeah, probably.
So she could have known, like, there's nothing to link me to it.
Yeah,
but
and so
anyway, sorry.
The only thing she had to worry about was if one of her accomplices talked. That would be the major worry there. And of course, she probably had already bumped them off.
Yeah.
Right. They're in a shallow grave somewhere out in the desert.
They had a car accident.
She could have had no accomplice though as well.
Mm-hmm. Or it could be if she did it all herself. Yeah, that's a good point. But also, as far as the whole just murder in general, I've got some issues with it. For one thing, there were no defensive wounds on his arms or his body. Like, for example, sometime when he was captured or escaped, there should have been a struggle. Maybe not. I mean, if he was drugged, for example, but still, you would think there'd be some sort of signs of a struggle from when he was captured.
You'd see signs around the, like, duct tape on his wrist and ankles, wouldn't you? Like extra bruising and stuff?
Yeah. Or stretch the material. It should have stretched itself.
Yeah.
Because duct tape does stretch.
Yeah, and from the photographs, it does not look like it's been strained on at all, really.
Although, one thing that I kept thinking about for the murder scenario is the autopsy talks about the hesitation marks. And I kept thinking about the fact that if his shirt had been cut open, his undershirt, his t-shirt,
been from that.
It could have been from somebody trying to reach over and get him with the knife and screwing with him, and then eventually cutting it open and making the excision. And of course, then it just happens to line up. It's like, oh, that's weird. There's several of these in a row, when in fact it's our sadistic murdering fiend torturing him even more, and it's misinterpreted.
Could have been.
Could have been. Yeah, could have been like, hey, how about I cut you right here?
Just a little. Just a little one here. Just a little more.
Yeah, a little more. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Can't believe we did that.
Oh, I know. Well, what else we talked about? Besides, you noticed the duct tape had not been strained out, but you can also see this and we talked about this already. It wasn't. The way it was wound around his wrists and ankles, they were individually wrapped and everything. Again, not like individually wrapped, exactly, but not like that. Again, like he'd been maybe strapped to a chair, but not his arms and legs strapped together or anything. So that's a little odd. The absence of fingerprints. This is a real telling point for me. The absence on the duct tape of fingerprints from him, which was noted by Dr. Cyril Wecht, a famous celebrity pathologist.
Yep.
And a lot of others, is seen as evidence that he did not stage his abduction and torture because his fingerprints not being on there. They should have been on there, but in my opinion, this is a misreading of the evidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, because to me, the absence of fingerprints indicates that he did stage his abduction. Because if he had been abducted and escaped, then his fingerprints should have been on the duct tape.
His fingerprint should have been there from the escape process.
From when he tore the tape, undid the tape, whatever he did to escape, right?
Unless he's pulled and stretched, and then they.
I was going to say, I can see a situation where he doesn't. If one arm, let's say just one arm gets free, I don't care which one it is, and he can't ease, if they're taped behind his back in some fashion, he would have to get some sort of tool or implement. I don't know what it is. Let's just say there's a big knife sitting there, and he reaches behind himself and cuts himself free. He would then use that same tool on his ankles rather than taking the time to grab the tape with his hands and begin the process of slowly tearing it apart. A knife would go through much quicker.
It would.
I can see. I can see
unlikely.
situations where there wouldn't be that. Like he would just, cut, run.
Yeah. I think that's unlikely though, because I think his captors.
Listen, I've watched enough Burn Notice to know that that's possible.
Well, yeah, if you got really, really stupid people, hey, not only are we so dumb, we're going to leave this guy here tied to the chair, but we're going to leave a big old knife next to him. Yeah, let's go get some Java. Yeah. So that's the problem. I don't see any realistic scenario where he does not touch that tape at some point, at least a couple of pieces of it. I just don't see it.
Unless he's wearing rubber gloves and applied it to himself, and it never was taped to some other object, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So if he did put it on himself, then it would make sense that he applied it himself using latex disposable gloves, tossed the gloves out his car window or whatever, and actually
left them at the scene when he did all these things.
Yeah, left it wherever he did that.
At the scene of the denippling.
Yeah, and actually using gloves to put it on would have been kind of the obvious thing to do, I guess. But again, if somebody else had done it to him, those fingerprints should have been on there, on the tape, and they weren't.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and so.
I would have imagined, though, I guess it depends on the kind of glove. Not all of them, but it seems like a lot, especially at that time, before there was the whole latex-free glove craze. All of those gloves, they have latex on both the inside and the outside, at least some. And so I would imagine that some of that latex powder, what is the powder? It's not the...
Yeah, it's not latex powder, but
put
some sort of talcum on.
Right. But that stuff is all over the inside and the outside, and so you would imagine that there would have been some residue of that on the actual tape itself, no matter who was wearing the gloves.
But I don't know. I don't know that they tested for that.
I'm guessing they must not.
Yeah, especially and actually when you dust something for prints, it might be hard at that point to tell the fingerprint dust from the gloves too.
It's true.
At that point. So yeah, but the duct tape is kind of a conundrum there.
What else have we got to talk about in this theory?
There was also the lidocaine. Remember, if somebody had wanted to torture, what the original coroner said, if they wanted to torture him, why would they have given him anesthesia? Well, that's a great point. Unless, of course, they just wanted to take his nipples and his pinky for sale on the black market, right? Yeah.
It's a Lebowski kind of thing.
That's a small market.
Yeah, but if the intent was to torture, then really, truly, the lidocaine does make no sense. But if the wounds were self-inflicted, then it does. And also, speaking of self-inflicted, you guys saw the autopsy report.
Yeah.
That described the wounds, and they're different. They're not. And when you see this on the web, it's always described as they were removed with surgical precision.
They were removed with some skill, but I wouldn't say surgical precision.
Yeah, and there's a difference between the two of them. The rightmost one had a nice, even, very well-defined little border around it where the cut was made.
Uh-huh.
And then the leftmost one, the border was more irregular and ragged.
And it had more dishing to it.
And it had more dishing. It was deeper, which indicates to me, you got your strong hand. The one hand is doing both. Do we
know it was shoe, right or left-handed?
That I don't know.
Because I'll be honest with you, if I were to take my own nipple off, I'm right-handed, then probably my left nipple would have the much cleaner cut than my right nipple.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
That's the thing I can't quite figure out, is that if he was, because I assumed all the same as you, that he was probably left-handed, because that would explain why the right one was a better cut. But then again, he chops the last joint of his left pinky off. So you would think he would have, if he was
Right-handed.
left-handed, he would have chopped off the right one and not the left one.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what you would think.
Correct.
Yeah, I know. But I don't know. But again, unless he had two different surgeons, or maybe the surgeon was like had some time or was kind of in a hurry on the second one or something.
Well,
I don't
okay,
know.
so listen, I will also say this, that part of my job on an irregular basis requires me to cut circular holes out of paper. And on some of those holes, I nail it, and it is almost a perfect circle, and you can't tell that it wasn't done by some kind of punch. And some of them look like I gave a pair of scissors to a 2-year-old to cut that circle out, because sometimes my aim is just off. And once you start, it's not like you can go back and fix it, because it'll, you just got to keep going.
Not yet. In the future, there will be undue scissors. not yet.
There will be, yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the irregularity actually speaks more towards somebody else doing it, because there could have been a difference
Right.
in like the amount of struggle that was put up.
Well, so he holds still for one, but kicks up a fuss with the other one.
Well, he's like maybe he's got more drugs in his system for one. Maybe he's
more
in more
exhausted.
pain and like losing a lot more blood for the second one, so he doesn't put as much of a fight up. I mean, like
He
they're
didn't... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
there just are like there's different circumstances that could be.
He wasn't bleeding that much from the
No.
nipple removal. Just so, I mean,
He
because
didn't
it was
lose a huge
it was
amount of blood, yeah.
literally
But we don't
a
know
flesh
which
wound.
one happened. Like we don't know what order any of these
But
happened.
We don't know.
right?
No, we don't.
But
yeah.
he would not
Right.
have been losing massive amounts of blood from.
Right, but it
from-
could have been like right one or left one first, right? And it's just like kind of mangled and
Okay.
God. And then they move on to the right one.
Well, you
And by
guys
that time,
suck.
he's just like, this super hurts.
And
I
he's
can't
worn
struggle.
down.
He's
Okay.
worn down. He's losing blood.
I think that's where Joe and I have been figuring that the nippleectomy was done one and then the other, and then at some point after that, the chest cut.
Well,
happened.
yeah, I
Whereas
have
if-
no
yeah.
answer.
Whereas if they literally worked their way from right to left or left to right across his body, that would explain that.
But who knows? I mean, really.
I don't know. To me, it just says self-mutilation. Personally,
It could be,
but
but also
yeah.
it could be. I mean,
I mean,
there's no rhyme or reason to
I mean,
any of this.
when you combine that again, if that was the only thing, but combined with all the other things, and especially the fact that lidocaine was used and there were no holes found, which means that the injections had to be done at where the cuts were done.
I don't remember seeing this in the autopsy, and I actually don't remember reading this when I was reading about lidocaine, but taking it orally, it takes quite a while to take effect, and I would imagine that they would have been able to identify that in his stomach contents, wouldn't you?
Probably.
I was trying to think.
I don't even
okay,
know
so,
if it's available in any sort of oral form. Is it?
well, no. What
you
it's a
talking about-
liquid.
yeah.
So what I'm